Today, I want to teach you some advanced expressions to help you improve your overall fluency. That's coming up. Hey everyone, my name is Wes. This is Interactive English, and the channel is all about trying to help you practice and improve your English skills. And today, I want to teach you some advanced expressions that I think are very useful, and they're pretty common in places like the United States. Now, I want to go ahead and say that these expressions are often used in spoken English. So these are expressions that you would hear if you're listening to a conversation or listening to a podcast or even watching a TV show or movie. So I'm going to give you as much information as I can and talk about these expressions in great detail so that you really understand what they mean, how they are used, why they are used, which again, it's really going to help your comprehension. So let's begin with our first expression, which is without further ado. And I think this is appropriate. I could say, without further ado, here is our first expression. And what this means, it just means immediately or without delay. And most of the time, people are going to use this expression when they're talking in front of a larger audience. Perhaps they are getting ready to introduce a person, and they could use without further ado.
So without further ado, my very good friend and the finest broadcaster I know, Bill McNeil.
So in that situation, they're talking about this person, they're saying all these great things, and just before they introduce them, they will say, without further ado, and then introduce the person. You could also use this expression before an event, before you introduce some event or before something begins.
So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, and Snail, start your engines!
Notice that in both of the examples that I just gave you, without further ado comes at the beginning of the statement. It becomes before you introduce the person or the event that's getting ready to start. One thing I do want you to know is that even though most of the time it's used in front of an audience, you could use it casually with smaller groups of people or even just one person. But most of the time, you are going to hear people use this expression when they're talking in front of an audience. And the next one that I have for you is with all due respect. And people would say this when they're trying to politely disagree with someone. But really, I'm not just talking about anyone. I'm talking about a person of authority. So you might say this if you want to politely disagree with your boss. Or you may hear people say this during a political debate, or even a lawyer might say this to a judge.
Your Honor, with all due respect, we ask you to enforce the subpoena.
With all due respect, Your Honor, Chloe Decker is not on trial.
So this is pretty common. If you're watching a TV show or movie that takes place in a courtroom, you may likely hear this expression. But no matter if you are talking about talking to your boss or a debate or even a conversation in a courtroom, you're going to use this expression in more of a formal situation. And the reason why people use it is kind of to soften the level of disrespect. Because when you disagree with someone, you don't want it to be very forceful, especially if this person is in a position of authority. So if this is your boss, you could say, all due respect, boss, I think that's a terrible idea. All right, you don't want it to be too forceful, so you could say all due respect. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that notice I did not include with. That is another thing about this expression, is that you can use it in different ways. You don't have to include with. You could just say all due respect, or even in British English, people might just say with respect. So there are different variations of this expression, but they all have the same meaning. You're trying to be polite when you disagree with someone. But most often, I think people would use with all due respect. Then we have the expression quote unquote. So it's one of my favorites from this lesson, and I'm going to take a little time to walk you through this. So what it refers to is what somebody directly says. And quote unquote, really, it refers to the quotation marks. So let me give you a quote, and I'm going to put some writing up here so that you can follow along. But remember, people are really going to use this in spoken English. So the quote that I'm going to say, and this, I truly believe this, I would say, "You guys are awesome." All right, that is my quote. So in a more formal situation, somebody like a news reporter could say, "Wes said, quote, 'You guys are awesome,' unquote." All right, but casually, I don't think people are really going to use it that way. But in that case, I'm really saying the entire quote, and I'm putting the direct words between quote and unquote. I think if somebody wanted in a conversation to talk about what somebody said and you want to say everything, I think it'd be more common for somebody to say something like this: "Wes said, and I quote, 'You guys are awesome.'" I think that would be more common in spoken English, but I think casually, informally, people would use quote unquote as a single phrase. They're going to use it together, and in that case, it's more like an idiom. You're also not really going to say the entire quote. What you're going to do is really just highlight a few words or even one word that's important. And I think that's commonly how it's used. So I could say something like, "Well, at work, she said she's been under quote unquote intense pressure." So the words that I want to highlight: intense pressure, that is something she said, and that's important. So if I'm telling somebody else this, I could say, "At work, she said she's been under quote unquote intense pressure," really emphasizing that.
Hi, it's the quote unquote auburn haired girl in 307.
He maimed him in a quote-unquote fit of rage.
You really are kind of a quote-unquote fantastic fox.
This expression may also be used sarcastically as well when you say something and you really mean the opposite. And in that case, it's the same way people would use air quotes. So perhaps you know somebody, they think they're an expert at something, but you really don't think so. And you're talking to another person and you say, "Yes, he is a quote unquote expert." So you don't really think they're an expert. You're saying it sarcastically, and you're using quote unquote to highlight the word or phrase that you're being sarcastic about. And you're also probably going to be able to tell based on somebody's tone and this the way that they're speaking.
With their drink now, or will that quote unquote embarrass you?
Why do we have to work around the clock to get our quote unquote partners to do what they already promised they would do?
Get a load of that quote unquote Santa. Can't believe those kids are falling for it.
Then we have the expression "all downhill from here." Or you could say "all downhill from there." This is more of an idiom, but the reason why I'm giving you this is because it can have two different meanings. And not only that, the meanings are really the exact opposite. So in this case, it's really important that you understand the context, because if somebody says it's all downhill from here, they could be talking about a situation that from now on, it's just going to get easier and easier. Think about a bike. If you ride your bike uphill, that can be pretty difficult. Once you get to the top and it's all downhill, it's pretty easy. You can sit back and relax and just cruise right down the hill. The other meaning, which is the exact opposite, is that if somebody says it's all downhill from here, they could be referring to that something is just going to get worse and worse and worse. That there's really nothing positive that's going to happen. And you'd say, yeah, it's all downhill from here. So let's quickly do a little bit of grammar and talk about the difference between saying all downhill from here and all downhill from there. So think about those words, here and there. Here is really talking about the present. So if you're referring to some situation in the present, you would say it's all downhill from here. And that could be for either meaning. And if you're going to use there, because there is talking about something that's further away, you would use that if you're talking about a situation that happened in the past, or even a situation that will happen in the future. Then you're going to use all downhill from there. That's a little bit of grammar to help you understand, well, should you use here or should you use there? So let's look at a couple of examples involving school to help you try to better understand the context and see if you can pick that out. So you see this girl right here. She's very happy and she may say, oh, today I turned in my final project. It's all downhill from here. So in this situation, you finish your final project, it's over, there's a lot of relief from this point on, it's all downhill from here, it's just going to get easier. Or maybe in another class, she's very upset and she says, in the beginning I was doing great, but then I stopped trying. It was all downhill from there. In that case, again, she stopped trying, so things became worse and worse and worse, and it was all downhill from there. I'm talking about a situation that happened in the past. She stopped trying, so it was all downhill from there. So check out this other example and see what you think. Is it talking about something that is going to become easier or something that is just going to get worse and worse?
This is the best time of your life.
It is?
Yes, it is. Pull it together because it doesn't get any better than this. It's all downhill from here.
So when we put this in context, we have this older guy talking to a younger kid that you should enjoy life now. It's great, you're young, because later on, it's just going to get more and more difficult. It's going to get worse and worse. It's all downhill from here. So that is the meaning that he was referring to. So just remember that with this expression, it has two different meanings. The meanings are opposite, and you just really need to put things in context. Then we have agree to disagree, and this is a great expression. It's one that I like to use, especially if you're having an argument with somebody and you want to stop arguing, you want to bring it to a close. You can just say, let's agree to disagree. People would use this when they have different opinions and they're not going to change their opinion. And instead of continuing to argue, to debate, to have this conversation, you could just say, look, let's agree to disagree. And it really kind of means what it says. It's basically saying that two people disagree, but the one thing that they can agree on is that they disagree. So you'd say, let's agree to disagree. And people will, I think they'll often use that statement right there and just say, yeah, let's just agree to disagree. We don't need to keep talking about this anymore. Neither one of us is going to change our opinion. Here are a couple of other examples.
I think we should be paid a living wage. You think that we're commies that need to go back to Russia. Agree to disagree.
Doesn't it mean Saint Diego?
No. No.
That's what it means. Really?
Well, agree to disagree.
So there really doesn't have to be a lot of anger or frustration. I think it's okay if people have different opinions, but sometimes I think it can get a little heated if you're having this debate and discussion and you're trying to change somebody else's opinion. This is a way to, I think, calm things down and just say, look, we don't need to continue talking about this. Let's respect each other's opinion. Let's just agree to disagree. And I truly hope that we can all agree that this was a useful lesson. And if you feel that way, you can let me know by hitting that like button. And again, just try to listen for these expressions because you will hear them from time to time. And I definitely think it will help you improve your English comprehension. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson. I hope you learned some new expressions. And I hope to see you in another English lesson. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.